Right, hello everyone. So today I would like to talk about Thomas Robert Malthus and his book, his 1798 book, an essay on the principle of population. I have read this book. I will admit to you right at the beginning of this video that I've read the book, but I read it a few years ago, probably about 2-3 years ago, but it had a huge effect on me. It's changed the way that I see the world. It's changed my political opinions of the world. But I have not reread the book for this video. This video will be more like a video that's inspired by the book than anything else. And but my view on things is that the reason I make these videos, of course, partly I'm inspired by Jonathan Bowden, but partly, because he would do interesting hour-long videos on intellectuals, which are always kind of fascinating. But he would say that his videos, he would use the character as a totem. And so he'd be inspired by, I don't know, whatever, Julius Evola or whatever it is he'd like to, whatever character it was that he was talking about. He'd take that as a platform or a launch pad, which he would use to talk about whatever he wanted, really. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. And obviously the idea, as I've said many times before, is that I think that when Western civilization was great, people would do their reading, they would do their homework, they would read the classics, and they would understand how our civilization is put together by reading the classics. If you don't read the classics, you don't know what's going on. And I'm not very well read. I pretend to be well read, but I'm not. I'm a slow reader, but I do read the classics. And slowly, as the years go by, it all kind of builds up and it kind of fits together, and it's like, ooh, it's interesting. So I do feel like if we want to save Western civilization, then we have to go back to the original sources of knowledge, and we need to talk about them, and we need to get into them. Otherwise, it's all just a bunch of anecdotal chit-chat on the internet, which is fine. That's fine. That's okay. But there's a big difference in listening to like ordinary pub talk on the internet and listening to somebody who has done their homework. Like just recently, I listened to Mencius Moldbug for the first time. Interesting character. Curtis Yarvin, his name is, some American Jewish guy who wants to bring back the monarchy. Essentially, he wants a technocracy, doesn't he? He's fed up with democracy, he wants a technocracy, and he wants some kind of king to come out of Silicon Valley and take over. I don't agree with his opinions, but it was a pleasure to listen to him speak, because his mind, he's done his homework, he's done his reading, he's done a lot of reading, a lot more than me, a lot more than I will ever do. And you can see his mind jumping here and jumping there. And it's a fascinating and beautiful thing. So anyway, that is what is going on here. It's been a long time since I've read the book, but it was a deep inspiration. So this is going to be more like, how did this book affect me? Right? What were the key ideas that I remember from the book? And I'm going to like take that and expand on it. So anyhow, Thomas Malthus wrote this famous book. What did I say? 1798, wasn't it? Yes. It's kind of an infamous book because it's the population control book, right? So there are a lot of people out there in the world that think Malthus is some kind of evil person who just wants to genocide poor people because there's not enough food in the world. Because obviously we live in an age of Bill Gates and his vaccine. And, Bill Gates standing up in a TED talk and quite audaciously declaring that we can reduce the population of the world through vaccination. Wow, that was an interesting slip of the tongue, wasn't it, Bill Gates? But we live in an age where it seems obvious that the elites that rule the world are complaining that there are too many people, and it seems obvious that they are attempting to reduce world population either through vaccines or perhaps through mass starvation, or perhaps through war, or perhaps through the promotion of homosexuality and feminism. I mean, I don't know exactly how they're going to pull it off. But they do seem to be talking about it a lot, and they do seem to be very concerned about it. And so all of their ideas can be traced back to Thomas Malthus. So people automatically think Malthus is some kind of evil elite who just wants to kill people. But this is not true. Malthus is just a man who observed and stated a basic truism, and he's essentially the first philosopher in history to really talk about this subject matter. I mean, to my knowledge, nobody in ancient times talked about it. I guess because back in those days, people were killing each other so much, or there was so much disease, or whatever it was. The population question never really seemed to pop up. I mean, I'm sure somebody's mentioned it, but he's like the most famous person. If you're looking for a new political idea that's popped up in the last 250 years, this is it. This guy is it. And he, by the way, he changed everything. He's not an ethno-nationalist, but he's the father. He's like the grandfather of ethno-nationalism, in a way. Arthur de Gobineau, the French guy, is really the first ethno-nationalist. And what I mean by that is that he wrote a book. I forget what his book was called. I've read it. But he wrote a book in which he looked at history from the point of view of different ethnicities and how different ethnicities behaved. So it's history through the eyes of race, as opposed to a normal history, which is just history. Well, in those times, a normal history would just be look at who the kings and queens were and what the wars and the battles were, and etc., etc. Or perhaps you'd have a Christian history of the world. I don't know. But he's the first person to look at history through the eyes of race. Of course, there are many different ways you can look at history. Marx looked at history through the eyes of class struggle. A feminist would look at history through the eyes of the women. And etc., etc. Arthur de Gobineau was the first ethno-nationalist because he looked at history through the eyes of race, but he was very much walking in the footsteps of Malthus. Darwinism. Darwin was walking in the footsteps of Malthus. Herbert Spencer, another guy, I read his book, actually I should really make a video about him, but one of the most famous thinkers of the Victorian age. I mean, go back to the late Victorian period, he was a very, very famous person. Nowadays, he's kind of been memory hold. I'm pretty sure he's the guy that said survival of the fittest. People often misquote that and say that was Darwin. He wrote a book which is utterly hilarious, because you read like the first few lines of the book, and it's just like, oh, the poor people, they're just poor and lazy. It's very, very like high Tory. Very stereotypical kind of Victorian attitude, very funny to read, but nonetheless, walking in the footsteps of Thomas Malthus. Not only has this guy had an influence on post-war elites who want to genocide humanity, but he was also a huge influence in the Victorian age. Also, probably an influence on perhaps on the Irish famine, who knows, right? Certainly does seem that there was a certain neglectful attitude by the Victorian elites in that they kind of figured, well, survival of the fittest, there's too many people, then they don't have enough to eat, we're just going to let them die out, which I think was terrible, by the way, because we let those people starve. Some people think it was a conspiracy, a deliberate attempt to reduce the Irish population. So obviously the Irish have always been a problem. They're Catholic and they wanted their own parliament. Throughout the entirety of the 19th century, they're kind of like fighting with the British Parliament to get their own parliament. We all know how that ended up. But some people think we were just like killing them off. I don't know if that's true or not. What I do know is true is that we neglected them and we didn't help them as much as we should have. And this is very bad. This is very awful of us. And definitely the politicians that allowed that to happen were influenced by Malthus. So, hugely influential. There would be no ethno-nationalism without this guy. And yet, I don't think that so many people have actually read his book. But what is the point that he made? Essentially, it all boils down to the idea that population is either controlled by misery or vice. All right, if you want to sum up this entire book in a sentence, that's it. Population will either be controlled by misery or vice. What does this mean? Well, it means that men cannot overcome their sex desire. And he talks about this, actually, how there have been attempts by various different people to like stop having sex, but we just can't stop doing it. So men cannot overcome their sex desire. They will have sex with their wives, regardless of whether or not they have enough food to feed the children that are produced by this sexual intercourse. and he argues that men's lust cannot keep up with the cultivation of land. It takes a long time to cultivate land and to grow food and to improve the farming techniques, etc., etc. It doesn't take such a long time to bash out 10 kids. So he argues that we will always have more children than we can feed, essentially. This is always going to be a problem. And thus he states that this overpopulation will either be controlled by misery or vice. If you have more children than you can feed, then you're going to have a starvation problem. Or you're just malnourished, so you can't feed your children properly, and because they're malnourished, they get sick and then they die. Or and that will control the population. So population is either controlled not by controlling lust, but it's either going to be controlled by famine, disease, war, or natural disasters, or any other horrible thing, or it's going to be controlled by contraception, which is a vice. I guess people don't think of contraception as a vice these days, but the Victorians, well, he wasn't a Victorian, he's pre-Victorian, but whatever. People in the past certainly did. I mean, there was a time when contraception was a dirty word and you shouldn't talk about it, right? Not so long ago. So contraception, a vice. Homosexuality, a vice. Feminism, vice. Abortion, vice. Not having children, vice. These are the two ways in which population will be controlled. A very, very simple, straightforward statement, but very, very fascinating. And that essentially is pretty much all I remember about Thomas Malthus, apart from the fact that he was a religious man. He ended up being not a vicar, but to be honest with you, I do not understand the various different hierarchies of the Church of England, but some kind of position in the church. So he wasn't trying to advocate that the government kills people. Okay, let me make that clear. He was just stating a very basic, straightforward truism about population. I think also, because I just glanced at the Wikipedia page before making this video, apparently he also believed in a theory of mind in which mind is affected by matter, essentially. So biology will form the mind. So essentially he rejected John Locke's blank slate theory of mind, and he accepted more of a biological determinism. So he was very much a nature and not nurture kind of guy, very much in line with ethno-nationalism. So that's interesting, but nonetheless, the point being is that he was right. And a lot of people like to say, no, we can have as many children as we want. No, this is just stupid and it's retarded and utopian and moronic. We cannot have 10, 100 billion, trillion people living on this planet, right? At some point, you've got too many people and you don't have enough food, right? We could irrigate the whole of the Sahara Desert and turn it into farmland. At some point, once you've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 billion people living on the planet, you just don't have enough food. That's it. There has to be a line. Now, you could get all science fiction about it and you could say, well, we could go into outer space. We have to spread across the stars. Well, even if you believe that's true, that's a science fiction solution, right? Even if it is true, I mean, it's like, okay, well, how many people can you fit in the solar system, right? Even if you colonize every planet in the solar system, at some point you're going to hit a brick wall where there's not enough space. I guess then you've got to expand outwards, haven't you? But that's science fiction realm. That's not reality. For what we know, and with the technology that we have, there are limits to population growth. That is just a fact. We could, I don't know, guys. I mean, we could theoretically cover the entire world in one massive city. Drain the oceans and drain the salt out of the oceans. And I was thinking about it. Like if you could make a skyscraper that's a farm. Right, if you could develop skyscraper farms, and so you could have cities that's like, you wouldn't need rural land anymore. You wouldn't need any kind of wilderness if you get good at making skyscraper farms. Do you understand what I mean? So you could theoretically cover the entire world. One giant city. And then you could dig down into the crust, hollow that out. All that magma down there, you could dig into that. You could hollow out the whole planet. You know, you could fill this world with trillions of people. But this is science fiction. This is like science fiction madness. In reality, population is going to be controlled by misery or vice. So this is just a truism. He was not an evil person. He was simply stating that this is the position that God, this is the way God made the world. This is our struggle, and this is what we've got to deal with. And he didn't say survival of the fittest, but he was kind of moving in that direction, as far as I remember. Now, what do I get out of all this? What do I get out of all this? Well, for me, this is very much my causa belli, right? My justification for war, which is at the heart of my political outlook on the world. And I don't remember Malthus taking it in this direction. But the way I see it is, once you understand that population is either going to be controlled through misery or vice, then you can understand that this world will always be at war. Because humans, regardless of the specific political system they use, they always cluster together in groups, nations, tribes, clans, etc., and they always wage war against each other. And why do they do this? They do this for the resources. They do this so that the men can feed their children. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And once you understand that you have different races and different nations living on this world, and there's not enough food for everyone, then you can understand that it's perfectly justified for people to wage war against each other. Because it's justified for a man to want to feed his children. It's morally, in my opinion anyway, I mean, I guess you could argue against this, but in my opinion, it's morally just for... I think there's a moral hierarchy in that you have to put yourself first. Because if you don't put yourself first, you can't help anybody else. If you're too weak, then you got to depend on somebody else, and then you're a burden to somebody else. So you always have to put yourself first. After that, it's your wife and it's your kids. After that, it's your extended family and friends. And after that, it's your nation and your tribe or whatever. And after that, it's the world as a sum total. Humanity as a sum total. Leftists will often step over their families and friends and extended family and their nation in order to appeal to the world as a sum total, which is kind of retarded way of looking at things. And I guess that's why they're hated, isn't it? Because they break the hierarchy. They break the hierarchy, and we've seen this played out a lot with. We've all seen the meme. I can't describe it, but somebody did a heat graph of the brain, or something. I can't remember. But people on the right are generally, they have in-group preference, and people on the left have out-group preference. People on the right, I think, are right. People on the left are stupid. They have an out-group preference because it's easy to care about people on the other side of the planet that you don't see. It's very difficult to care about your own friends and your own family, because that means you'll actually have to do something. You can walk around the place and say, I care about the poor children starving in Bangladesh. I mean, that's easy, isn't it? I could say that. I could sit here and say, yay, Black Lives Matter. It's a zero effort way of looking good and feeling good about yourself, isn't it? The poor starving children in Africa. Oh, I'm such a good person because I care about them. You don't care about them. You're just selfish, and you're concerned with your family, and you're so bigoted, and I care about the world. It's very easy to say this thing, which is why leftists go for it, because usually they're quite awful people, and they're disloyal to their friends and their family, so they got to make up for it somehow. But anyhow, the point I'm trying to make is I do believe that there's a hierarchy of concern. Like, it's good to care about the world, but it's at the bottom of what you should be caring about. It's like you've got to look after everybody else first, and then you can care about the world. So once you understand this, then you can understand that it's good to care about yourself first, it's good to care about your family first, and then it's good to care about your tribe and your clan first. And once you get to the point of caring about your tribe and your clan, then you can understand why it's good for you to wage war against other nations for resources. Unless, I suppose, I mean, let's think about this. I'm opening my mind up now in the middle of this video essay. I mean, there are other ways of protecting your family. You could be an aristocracy and not care about the people that you rule over. You could be Jewish or some other kind of mercantile race that's, you know, spread across the world, and you live amongst other nations and you're not really loyal to them, and you don't really want to get involved in their wars. So I mean, there's other ways of protecting your people, I suppose. But just to look at it in a very simplistic way, nations will always wage war against each other because there's not enough food. And so what I'm trying to say is that you have a justification to fight. Okay? You have a justification to fight. You have a justification to wage war. You have a justification to be warlike. Because this world is a meat grinder. There isn't enough food. There isn't enough natural resources to go around. And it is your moral duty to feed your family. That is the morally right thing for you to do. And if you have to kill other people, other men, so that you can get the food to feed your family, that is the morally right thing for you to do. It is also the morally right thing for them to kill you so they can get your food and they can feed their family. That's morally right, and it's fair. That's the way I see the world. This world is a meat grinder. This world is constantly at war. Everybody in this world has a justification to wage war against everybody else. There will never be peace in this world. So once you understand all of this, you can understand why I always defend Winston Churchill and Bomber Harris. Why? Because it is morally good to wage war, and it is morally good to have a warlike nature, and thus it is morally good to impose is not the right word, to encourage a warlike nature and mentality amongst the young men of the nation in order to prepare them for battle against the world, because there's not enough food. Which means that we should be filling the minds of our young men with images of glory and images of battles and images of the English conquering the world. We should be putting these ideas and these thoughts into the minds of our young men. And we should be encouraging them to fight, to have that kind of mindset. And so if you turn against Churchill and you say, oh, but, you know, he's a warmonger. He's a warmonger, and he started a war, and this has happened, and that has happened, and oh, blah, blah, we should have let Germany conquer Europe, and blah, 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 blah. And, oh, I'm sorry, we bombed Dresden, and it's so bad, and I'm so sorry for it, and oh. If we develop that kind of mentality, you're putting a wet flannel on the warrior spirit of our people. The real attitude of the Second World War should be like, I don't even care if Churchill started it. I don't even think he did. I think Hitler started it because he was a warmonger. But whatever, even if Churchill did start it, I don't care. It's good. It's good that we went to war. It's good that we fight. It's good. It's good for us. It's healthy. Europe was a much better place when we were waging war against each other. Europe has declined in the post-war period when we've imposed peace upon ourselves. We've imposed peace. What does it mean to impose peace? What does it mean? It means you've given up on war. So you've given up on misery, controlling the population, and you've accepted the idea that vice will control the population. And this is what's happened to us. The wars have ended. And so now we've all turned gay, right? We've embraced homosexuality and feminism, and we've become weak, and the men have become feminized, and now foreigners are pouring into our country, and the men are just like, oh, can't do anything about it because I don't want to be racist. That is what happens to your country if you embrace peace and you give up on war. Because the solution to the Malthusian problem is war, right? Population is either going to be controlled by misery or vice. So which one do you want to do? Well, the solution is to choose misery and make it somebody else's misery. If you choose vice as the solution to the population problem, if you say, well, we don't have enough food, so let's just be gay so we have less children, then what will happen is you will just weaken your population and you'll get conquered by somebody else, which is what has happened to us. Because in the post-war period, everybody has embraced Wilsonian idealism, right? Wilsonian idealism was developed by Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States of America. And the idea of Wilsonian idealism is essentially it's the American dream for the whole world. One world republic, a one world government, a one world collection of democracies. Everybody votes, and then there'll be world peace. I can actually trace this idea back to Immanuel Kant. He's written a book about it. I'm sure many other people have talked about it before, but it's just interesting because a lot of interesting books and new ideas appeared after the French Revolution. You've got the birth of feminism, Mary Wollstonecraft. You've got birth of conspiracy theory with proofs of conspiracy by, what was his name? John Robinson. You've got the beginnings of anarchism. You've got the beginnings of, the population question, ethno-nationalism. You've got the beginnings of horror. I mean, that's what Mary Shelley came quite a bit after, didn't she? But, came 20, 30 years after. But anyway, lots of interesting ideas popped up after the French Revolution, which I always just find to be very, very interesting. Nonetheless, the point being, Immanuel Kant, apparently one of the first people, the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, one of the first people to propose this idea, world peace through democracy. So this idea was embraced by Woodrow Wilson, the progressive, and introduced at the end of the First World War. Of course, they created the League of Nations, and of course that collapsed and it was replaced by the United Nations. And now we live in a world that's run by America, but also by the United Nations, and also by a bunch of international institutions which are just kind of floating around. We live in a world of globalism. We live in a world where everybody votes and they want democracy, and war is considered to be bad. And what has happened? Well, we've all embraced vice, haven't we? Especially the West. Other countries as well, but especially the West. And so we've all become feminized, and now we're being conquered by Islam. Because the Muslims still have a warlike spirit. Why do they have a warlike spirit? Because it's intrinsic to their religion. Their religion is a religion of jihad. It is central. You cannot escape this idea. If you die in battle, then you'll go to heaven and you'll get 72 virgins. It's very similar to... I think it's quite noble in a way. Obviously, I'm not a fan of Islam, but nonetheless, it is quite noble. It's similar in a way to Norse paganism, in that the Vikings believed if you die in battle, obviously you'll go to Valhalla, which is in turn similar to the Bhagavad Gita. This is what they preached in the ancient Aryan religion of the Veda in India. If you die in battle, you will go to heaven. This is the easy way to heaven. It's glorious to die in battle. It is a good thing to die in battle. I think we need to adopt this philosophy again, the warrior spirit. And I remember recently reading a book about the fall of the Byzantine Empire, the fall of Constantinople, and the Emperor of Byzantine. He was trying to encourage the Emperor of Constantinople. He was trying to encourage the priests to tell the Christians that if you martyr yourself, you go to heaven, and they just wouldn't accept it. But they should have done, and it would have been glorious if they had done. I think it would have transformed the Catholic religion, the Christian religion, but they didn't, and there you go. So Christianity is not really a warrior religion, but Islam is. So Islam cannot be. Islam does not fit into Woodrow Wilson's plan for a new world order, and it is a new world order that he's building. That's where the term comes from. We live in the new world. The old world order was the British Empire, right? That's when everything was great, and that was torn down by the Americans on the outside and by the Fabians on the inside. People blame it on Churchill, but it wasn't Churchill. It was Attlee. Attlee was our greatest enemy. But the empire was torn down, and now we live in the new world order. People say, oh, they're going to build a new world order. No, we already live in it. America is, of course, the new world. Okay? Does it make sense now? So we live in the new world order, and the new world order is Wilsonian idealism. Idealism in the political sense means, as opposed to realism. I'm a realist. The Malthusian way of looking at the world is the realist way of looking at the world. Right? This is the way that people really are and they really behave. The idealist way of looking at the world is, oh, can we all just get along and be peaceful and hug each other? So we currently live in an age of idealism. Oh, we can all just get along, and there doesn't have to be any war. We can have peace, and we can feed all the starving African children. This is nonsense. We cannot all get along. There is not enough food. We are going to kill each other at some point. Okay, guys, we're going to kill each other. And if we don't kill each other, the only way we'll control population is through vice. And if we control population through vice, we'll get weak. And if we get weak, we'll get conquered by Islam. Because Islam is a martial religion. It is a warrior religion. So that is what is going on in the world, and this is why I defend Winston Churchill. Essentially, when I look at English history, I see English history as a story that is there to encourage young men to fight. That is all it is. I take a heuristic view of English history, in that we are good and we are right, and then I rearrange the facts of English history in order to justify how we are good and how we are right. Why do I do this? Is this a subjective history? Yes, it is. It is my opinion that all history is subjective. All history is national history. You can take an international view of history. I mean, you can write that book if you want to. You can write a book about the history of the white race if you want to, or the history of the African race if you want to. There are many different races of Africans, and they're all fighting and killing each other. But you could lump them all together and make one big story out of it. I mean, you can do these things, but really, the beating heart of history is nationalistic history, and it's jingoistic. It's triumphalist, and it should be triumphalist. It is necessary that it's triumphalist because you want to encourage the young men to fight. Why? Because war is necessary. Why? Because there's not enough food. There's not enough food, guys. I'm sorry, don't shoot the messenger. So what happens when ethno-nationalists say, oh, we should have let Hitler win the war? Well, this is just the opposite of triumphalist history. This is a commiseration. This is psychotic, really. This is suicidal history. This is, I wish my granddad was killed by the Nazis and my grandmother was raped by a Nazi. Essentially, I mean, that's genuine, because that's what happens in a war. My grandfather fought in the Second World War. So, essentially, all the British neo-Nazis wish that my grandfather was dead, which means they wish I was dead. It's a self-suicide. It's madness. But nonetheless, you are disencouraging the warlike spirit. You see? And we need to encourage the warlike spirit. We should have... I mean, we all saw on Twitter recently, Lord Miles. Remember that guy? I don't know what's happened to him. He's disappeared. But remember, he kicked up a fuss. He was joking. He was saying he was going to invade Haiti, get a team together, and they were just going to invade the country. That is the kind of thing that young men should be thinking about. I've been thinking we should invade Somalia. For whatever reason, I've seen people posting pictures of it online, and apparently it's beautiful. They've got beautiful beaches. I mean, it's really nice. It's just inhabited by idiots. I reckon we could take the whole country with 10,000 men if we're organised. 10,000 Royal Marines, 10,000 legitimately trained British soldiers could probably definitely take the country. So it's doable. It's not an impossible thing to do, but these kinds of things don't happen anymore because the warlike spirit has been extinguished. Right now, it's everything's got to be peace. Right, it's all about peacekeeping, keeping the peace. It's nonsense. Where's the glory? So essentially, at the end of the day, I don't even care if Churchill started the war. I don't think that Churchill did start the war. I think it's obvious that Hitler was a warmonger. He wrote a book called Mein Kampf. He talked about he had a plan to take the East. He wanted Lebensraum. He wanted living space. This is obvious. He wrote in Mein Kampf, he said, the Treaty of Versailles cannot be reversed without violence. It's very, very obvious that he was warlike, and I don't blame him for it. I don't hate him for it. If I was a German, I would support Adolf Hitler because I would be playing for my team, and I would be playing for the warlike spirit of the Germans, and I'd be cheering them on in the same way that the Mongolians cheer on Genghis Khan, in the same way that the Russians have to kind of like, in a commiserating sort of way, they have to cheer on Stalin. Even though he's a total monster, a total psychopath, he was still their warrior. He won the war, right? Killed a lot of Russians. Nasty guy. But he won the war. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. So, every nation should support its warriors. This is what Julius Evola said. This is what Jonathan Bowden said. This is where I got the idea from. Jonathan Bowden. The whole British dissident right likes to cheer on Bowden. But they don't understand him. Even Jonathan Bowden doesn't understand himself. He didn't take the philosophy to this ultimate conclusion. But he did talk about Bomber Harris. And he did say every nation... He did say there was a certain glory to the way that Bomber Harris was willing to get his hands dirty, murdering children and so on and so forth for the sake of his country. I mean, Bowden said this. The reason I think the things today is because Bowden led me here. It's just Bowden didn't take that final step and reject the neo-Nazism. I'm just taking the final step. What I am saying is the conclusion of Bowdenism. It goes Nietzsche, Evola, Bowden, Brutus. Okay? Okay? That's how these ideas have been formed. I know that sounds like an awfully egotistical thing to say, but I mean, it's just kind of true. Like, nobody understands Jonathan Bowden. Nobody understands Julius Evola. Nobody understands Nietzsche. Not really. Not in England, they don't. Because they're all grovelling in the corner saying, oh, I'm sorry for Dresden. It's absurd. On the one hand, people are saying, oh, it's good that the Mongolians are proud of Genghis Khan. And then on the other hand, they're like, oh, Churchill was a warmonger. Who cares if he was a warmonger? He was a warrior. Who cares? He had the spirit of violence. And it is that fire of violence that we must inflame. We must keep that spirit burning. And I've been very much inspired by a guy called The Fat Electrician. He's got a YouTube channel. I 100% recommend that you go and check him out. I've got a bit of a cold. He tells war stories, American war stories, just about different soldiers doing different things. But he tells it in a great way. But they're great videos. They're an hour long, like mine, so it's good to listen to. But one recurring theme in every single story that he tells is that all of these men just wanted to fight. They just wanted to fight for the sake of fighting, really. I mean, it's like they went to war because that was a good excuse. I mean, partly it's patriotic duty to their country. That's definitely part of the thing. They felt that they had to go and fight for their country, but they also just kind of like fighting. And the really vicious ones, like they were offered things and they were like, nah, I just want to go back to the battlefield. They loved the violence. They loved it. They thrived on it. These great, like the psychotic things that all these guys do. There's no great intellectual. They're not like pondering on the glories of capitalism or whatever. No, they just want to fight. They're tough guys and they want to fight. And I'm not pretending to be a fighter, by the way. Sometimes I wish I was. Sometimes I think I've missed the point a little bit. Sometimes I think one reason, maybe we're all doing too much philosophizing on the internet, and we should just start going out and drinking and getting into punch-ups. Maybe that's the path forward. I don't know. I'm a bit old for that, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, they would fight for the sake of fighting. They would fight for the pleasure of fighting. I mean, it reminds me of that guy. Remember that tattooed guy? He did an interview with Liam Tufts. The guy that's just recently interviewed Steve Laws. Great interview, by the way. You remember, 6 months ago, there was that biker gang guy with the tattoos on his face, and he said he was going to form an organization to protect young women. And people got excited about it for like 5 minutes, and then it turns out like he's hanging out with a bunch of Muslims, and it all got a bit weird, and then he just got memory hold. Remember that guy? So I watched the interview he did, and he was just telling people like he was a bouncer for some time, and he was just telling some story about how he got into a scrap with a rugby club, a bunch of rugby players, while he was working the doors. And he had a smile on his face. He was like, yeah, that was a great scrap. So it's there are guys out there that just really like fighting. They have the warrior spirit. And it's men like that built this nation. And it's men like that went out and conquered the world. And Churchill was a guy like that. He did some heroic feats. I mean, he got famous. Didn't he get famous for breaking out of prison, I think? Didn't he, in the Boer Wars? I forget. I should know my Churchill history really well, seeing as I defend him so much. But really, when it comes to Churchill, I'm just defending the ideal. I'm not even really defending the man himself. I just recognize that he is an image, an icon of the warrior spirit of England. He's the man that did the famous speech, "We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall fight them in the fields." That's it. Our darkest hour. Churchill stood strong. If that's what the nation's rallied behind. And if you want to start commiserating that, you want to start crying about, we shouldn't have gotten involved in the war, again, you are putting a wet flannel on the warrior spirit of our nation. You're telling the young men, war, it's awful and it's bad. And I mean, a similar thing goes for the Iraq War, by the way. I know a lot of people are fed up with that war. I think, first of all, we should definitely not be apologizing for blowing up Iraq, because then, it just opens you up to insult. I mean, this is the problem with Churchill as well. You start apologizing for winning the Second World War. Now you've got a bunch of Germans having a go at you, and you've got, more specifically, and perhaps more importantly, you've got a bunch of Americans having a go at us, calling us the Jews of Europe, because we dragged America into the war, right? So they're all insulting us now on the internet. Oh, you British, blah, 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 right? So the minute you start tearing down your warrior icons, you start opening yourself up to insult. This is why the Russians are so smart for standing behind Stalin. If they were to start tearing down the myth of Stalin, they'd have the whole of Eastern Europe having a dig at them and asking for reparations. Currently, that is not happening because everybody knows the Russians are just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, we invaded your country. What are you going to do about it? Oh, that's right, nothing. Yeah. You see what I mean? They still have that warrior spirit. But the point I was making was that in regard to the Iraq War, we shouldn't be apologizing for the war itself. I do understand a lot of people have, they don't, no more wars in the Middle East. The problem is not war. The problem is fighting for the wrong things. That's not in our interests. That's the problem. The problem is you've got an Israeli lobby that's dragging America into foreign wars that are not really in its interests. Like, we're not conquering these countries. I mean, you can say the same thing about Vietnam. It's proxy. I mean, at least that had more of a reason because it's a proxy war against the Soviet Union. So that's something, I suppose. But they didn't conquer Vietnam. They didn't go there and keep it for themselves, which is what they should have done. But if America was to start fighting for its own self-interest, then I think a lot more people would be much more enthusiastic about waging war. I mean, why can't America just conquer the Mediterranean? Why not just take Jamaica and Cuba and all of that? Just take all of it. You don't have to make it part of the United States of America. You could just make it, a region of the world that's just controlled by America, right? So America just runs the governments, and you could slowly just take the land. Why not? That'd be a good war. Or conquer Canada. Go north and take that. You see, so there are good wars. Like we can invade Somalia. Let's just take Somalia. Why not? I've got the Horn of Africa right there. All those shipping lanes going nearby. Put some military bases there. Put some missiles pointing at the Middle East. I mean, even the Iraq War wouldn't be so bad if we'd have just taken it and then kept it and colonized it. We should have like 10 million people living there by now. We should have just taken it and kept the oil for ourselves. Built our own cities. Planted some trees. And said, yeah, this is ours now. It's British Iraq. Colonized it. Why not? I mean, that's my plan for the Middle East, in case you didn't know. Invade the Middle East. What we're going to do is we're going to invade the Middle East. And then we'll take all the Mexicans out of America and we'll just put them in the Middle East. Like the Mexicans can deal with the Muslims. Okay, so we'll Christianize the Middle East with the Mexicans. And there'll be like the white people on top. So we'll create like a caste system. You know, you got the whites on top, and then you got the Mexicans, and then you got the Muslims at the bottom. That's a plan. But anyway. Point being, my point is, I believe in a subjective, triumphalist history, a subjective, nationalistic, triumphalist history, the purpose of which is to encourage men to fight. It's to encourage a warlike mentality in young men, because there's not enough food. That's it. That is what I got. That is what I learned. That is what I philosophized in my tiny little brain after reading Thomas Malthus. That is the solution to the Malthusian problem. That's at the heart of ethno-nationalism. Essentially, Hitler was right. Living space. Hitler was right, by the way. Living space. And again, like I keep saying, if I was German, I would have supported Hitler. It's not in the interests of us, the British, to have a giant Germanic empire in the heart of Europe. We've always maintained a balance of power in Europe, which is essentially just a divide and conquer tactic. You've got Germany, you've got France, you've got Spain, you've got Italy, and you've got some other countries, and we've all got our own territories, and you kind of keep a balance. So, and that's all that Churchill was maintaining, by the way. I don't think he was the warmonger. He was just pointing out, like, got to be careful of these Germans. They want to take over, because once they take Europe, they're gonna do us next. And our island nation, although the ocean does provide some defense, if you win in the air, you could take this country. If Hitler had any sense at all, he would have won the Battle of Britain, aerially dominated us, and then just bombed us into submission, and then just waltzed across and just taken us. He could have done it, but he didn't, because he was a retard. He started a two-front war. I mean, the way that people idolize this guy is just like he's some kind of genius. It's just nuts. The guy was dumb. I mean, they all hurl insults at Churchill. They never point out Adolf's stupid idea of declaring war on America. I mean, that was... and that's how you know it's a cult, because they won't accept any criticism of the leader. He has to be a Jesus-like, prophet-like figure who's just beyond, like, untouchable, you see. I'm not a member of a cult because I can accept criticism of Churchill and his mistakes. And I can accept, praise of Hitler, and I can see both sides. So I do feel like I have a balanced opinion. But you have debates with neo-Nazis, and it's just... they'll never accept it. You can say, why did Hitler invade why did Hitler declare war on America? And they're just like, they won't admit, yeah, that was dumb. They won't do it. They can't do it because that's a little crack in their way of looking at the world. It has to be Hitler is the best and everything is to blame on Churchill. Everything is to blame. You have to throw all of the hatred at Churchill so that Hitler is clean, right? Because the minute that you admit that Hitler also had faults, now you've entered into a territory where it's okay. It's like, oh, okay, well, Hitler was a faulty person. Churchill was a faulty person. They both made mistakes. And once you come to that conclusion, then it's like, well, if they're both two faulty leaders, why can't I just support my own team? I might as well just play for my own team, which is my attitude. I just play for my own team. I'm on the English team, so I support the English. You see, so that's why they'll never accept any critique. And that's why they always, it's always a case of you have to. They don't even want you to support Hitler as long as you hate Churchill, and then you'll be accepted, because they know that once you hate Churchill, you're essentially de facto supporting Hitler, even though you're not saying it out loud. Because in any conflict, you have to pick a side. You can't just be neutral. There's no such thing as a neutral position on the Second World War. You have to pick a side. We're not, unless you're an alien from Mars, even then you'd probably pick a side. But history is subjective. You can't be neutral. You can't be objective in history. You're English. There's no such thing as an objective point of view in the Second World War. You have to. You either support your team or you're a traitor. That's it. That's the choice. So if you turn against Churchill, you've betrayed your country. You've betrayed the warrior spirit of your country, and now you've sided with the Germans. Try explaining it to a 5-year-old. Explain it to a 5-year-old boy. Tell them that Churchill's bad. What's he going to think? He's going to think, well, Hitler's good then. And then he's going to think, well, the Germans are good and the English are bad. And he's going to think, right? And then now, next thing you know, he's fantasizing about being a Nazi and killing his grandfather, which is a self-suicide. Do you see what I'm saying, guys? Do you understand? It's a suicide of the self to support the other team. So in regard to, Tony Blair's war and the war in Iraq and all of these things, like, it's not the wars themselves that are bad. It's not blowing up Libya or whatever it is. I mean, Gaddafi, I don't think we should have blown up Libya, but it's not the wars themselves that are bad. It's the fact that America is controlled by an Israeli lobby, which is waging war for Israel and not for us. If we were waging wars for ourselves that were in the interest of the English, then the wars would be fine. You see, this is the thing. I mean, even like, look at the Ukraine war and the Russian war. I just want the thing to end. Why? Because Russia's good? No. Because Ukraine's good? No. Because I have a geopolitical plan, and that geopolitical plan is we should forge an alliance with Russia. Why? Because it should be white nations against the world. That's what we need to do at this point, because we're really on our back foot at the moment. I don't really think we should have brother wars at the moment, to be honest with you. We need to focus on reconquering the world. That's what we need to do. That's what happened at the end of the 30 Years' War, right? Yeah, the Peace of Westphalia that established the balance of power in Europe, and then European nations kind of concentrated their energies on projecting outwards. This is what we need to do again. Project outwards, right? Revive the warrior spirit of the European people and start projecting power outwards and onto the world. And so we don't really want to be waging a war with Russia. We should be using Russia to control China, because obviously it shares a border with China, and China gets a lot of its energy and its natural resources and what have you from the Russians. Russia's very vulnerable to a Chinese attack, by the way. Russia's only really ever been defeated from the east. It was the Mongolians that took Russia. Napoleon failed and Hitler failed, but Genghis Khan, well, it wasn't Genghis, it was one of his sons. They took Russia, didn't they? So The point is you have to have a warrior spirit. You have to encourage the warrior spirit. The justification for this is Malthus's the Malthusian problem. There's not enough food. It's misery or it's vice. So make it somebody else's misery, and it's good to do so. That's the way God created the world. It's survival of the fittest. And I also think that we should have a master plan. We should have a master plan of global domination. We should be dreaming of the empire. Because the way I see it, when it comes to politics, it's like a game of chess. It's like a game of chess. When it comes to geopolitics, you got to think about the whole board, and you got to win the game. And winning the game means being the dominant superpower of the world. That's how you win the game. So if your political ideology does not include conquering the world, then I would argue that your political ideology is incomplete. You should dream of conquering the world. That's the natural British way of doing things, right? Why did I take the name Brutus? Because the mythological founder of Britain is a guy called Brutus. Britain is named after Brutus. The British Empire is essentially the Trojan Empire. That's what it is, guys. It's the Trojan Empire. Most people don't understand it because they don't know their history. Right? These are why the legends are important. This is why people should not be listening to archaeologists with all their flip-flap nonsense about, oh, I dug up a skeleton and I did a DNA test. Boring. Okay? Boring. Not inspirational. I want a legend. I want to hear the story of Brutus, and he's on an island in the Mediterranean, and he goes to sleep, and Diana herself comes and gives him a vision of the British Empire conquering the world. That is what I want, because that's what happened. That's a legend. Did it actually happen? Probably not. Is it a great story? Yeah, it's a great story, so we'll go with that. Forget all the DNA nonsense. It's boring. I don't care. Young men need a story. They need a legend. Not only do they need to celebrate our battles and our victories and have a warrior spirit. This warrior spirit should be transcendent. It should be spiritual. It should be mythical. It should be legendary. It should mean something. Young Englishmen should believe that this world is ours to rule over, as given to us by destiny herself, by the goddess Diana, god of the moon. The goddess of the moon gave us the vision, gave us the blessing to conquer the world. We did build the second Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was a Trojan Empire, also descended from Troy. The British Empire was like the second Trojan Empire. That's what we built. It's glorious. So people should have this vision inside them and stop listening to a bunch of neo-Nazis crying about Dresden. It's pathetic. It's awful. Such a flip-flop, wish-wash, dribble-drab. And we should understand there's not enough food in the world, and you want to be top dog. You want to dominate so that we can feed our people. There should be more English people and less of everybody else. That's the dream. We should be having more sex and making more children and sending our children out to colonize. This is what we should be thinking of, not this kind of like weak, scrawny kind of white nationalism of, if only like things were a little bit better like they were in the 90s. No, you have to dig the whole thing up and start expanding outwards and start dreaming. Why are the Muslims strong? Because they have a dream. They have a dream. Vision. A one world caliph. One world Islamic government. Right? That's a caliphate. That's what they dream of. And it's a dumb dream, but it is a dream. And so it motivates them and it pushes them onwards. Where's our dream? Well, we can't have a dream, apparently, because we won the Second World War and everybody's busy crying about it and apologizing for it and poo-hooing our warriors. We should celebrate every battle. We should create a national religion based on warfare and the winning of battles. This is what the Jews do. Half of the Jewish holidays they have are celebrations of battles they won a long time ago. Our national religion should be a celebration of Waterloo Day, Battle of Agincourt, and etc. I should know these things. I should have these things on the tip of my tongue. I don't, and it's embarrassing. What can I say? I'm trying my best. But we should celebrate all of our battles every year and teach our young men. Celebrate D-Day. Celebrate Dresden. Celebrate it. The gore and the violence and the fire. Celebrate the horror. Don't shy away from it. That's war. The minute you start shying away from it and apologizing for it, you've got a big problem on your hands. Because there's not enough food. Okay? So there you go. That is my opinion on Thomas Malthus, Principles of Population. Great book. I recommend that you read it. And that was fun. I enjoyed that. So anyway, God bless. Thank you for listening, and rule Britannia.